In 2011, two academics were seeking National Science Foundation funding for a growing occupation that was emerging in the modern 21st century warehouse they called the supply chain technician. The use of automated material handling equipment and systems required to more efficiently meet customer demands was growing. Automated systems, typically found in manufacturing operations, and the technologies behind them had become more affordable and reliable. This emerging technician occupation, with a distinct career pathway, was occurring at the intersection of traditional industrial mechanics with motor controls and information technology. The demand for these well-paid, multi-skilled technicians was growing exponentially, and no one outside the industry knew it. Hands-on educational training programs contextualized to meet this growing demand were non-existent. Related industry-validated occupational certifications were nowhere to be found. The two academics I referenced earlier convinced an NSF program officer to come to California to see some of these automated facilities in operation, with the goal of providing hands-on background to their funding request. He agreed to make the trip and was taken on a tour of the 1.4 million square foot fully automated Skechers building that included robotic systems and highly automated Cardinal Health and a highly automated Cardinal Healthcare operation. Like most people, the NSF program officer had no idea automated systems like these were in today's technically advanced logistics environment. He was extremely surprised and amazed. He could see why these highly automated systems required skilled technicians to keep them operational. The center's funding request was approved. This slide illustrates examples of the automated systems that exist in today's 21st century automated warehouse. Many people drive down roads and where on the side of the road are these huge white buildings. Inside those white buildings, you'd never know some of the technologies that are involved. This is an example of some of the technologies from Swisslog, goods to movement systems, robotic systems, pallet cranes, AGV, robotics, all types of technologies are used in today's modern supply chain. So I mentioned earlier the National Center became funded. The focus of the center is on technician occupation, the technician occupation, resource development, and everything the center does is industry guided and driven. There's no user cost for any of the resources that are developed. It's grant funded, and the center does not participate in student education. Educational collaborators who are part of the center's network take care of that. So the core mission of the center is to increase the supply of highly qualified supply chain automation technicians. It's part of the mission and objectives. And objective number 4, establish and promote stackable national industry certifications in supply chain automation, which are validated and recognized by industry, is one key aspect of our work. And today's webinar is centered around that in the center's involvement in that effort. When the center was initially funded, we had a series of academic partners and academic schools in different parts of the country. This is a sample of who those partners were. Since then, we have added Central Piedmont Community College in Charlotte, North Carolina. Part of the center's founding involves engaging industry. And this is an example of logos representing individuals from companies who participated and contributed content to center resource development and help guide and strategically direct the center in its work. So at the core also of the center is the occupational definition, which was given to us by industry. A person who installs, maintains, supports, operates, or upgrades the automated material handling equipment and systems which support the supply chain. And you can see all of the variety of skills that an individual technician would require in order to fit this occupational need. In manufacturing, traditionally, occupations have been much more specific. In today's logistics world, you have people that do a lot of these different functions. So there is an organic career pathway that which is part of the center's, which is part of the occupation supply chain automation technician. It involves a stepping stone beginning at a tech trainee level and going on to a tech one. The thing that's most important is that the technician occupation here has an ongoing career pathway where wages start around $40,000 an hour and grow as you move through the career pathway up to jobs that are in excess of $80,000, $100,000 a year or more. So this is an illustration of that particular career pathway from one of our industry partners. One of the things the center does is develop resources that are useful to educators and at sometimes industry contacts or industry leadership team members. In this case, the center with 6 contributors from industry developed an Intro to Automated Warehouse e-textbook. It's designed as a survey course for high school or community colleges to raise career awareness. Students have to be aware of careers in the supply chain before they ever decide to choose to go into that field. And it's an interactive book available on iBooks and PDF and downloadable. You'll get a link to download this book after the webinar that for those of you that are interested in that. So there's some interesting trends that have been occurring for quite some time that have been accelerated by COVID. And this particular graph is quite interesting. It's a graph of US e-commerce sales as a percent of retail sales in the country and its growth over the past 10 years. Of particular interest was the growth between the year 2019 and 2020, where total US retail sales were moving from traditional retail into e-commerce at a clip of about 85 billion a year, 2% in terms of this slide. And what COVID has done is reshaped that. If you look at this particular slide, it shows the more recent boots on the ground data that comes from the US Department of Commerce. And in the prior slide, if you look on the right-hand column, it shows that about 13% of US retail sales were going via e-commerce. This slide shows that in the second quarter, 16%. So that's quite large if you look at these dollar amounts between 2019 and 2020. You have an $85 billion forecasted jump between year to year. And what that amounts to industry is it's incredibly challenging because companies typically have shipped one carton at a time or a pallet at a time. They're now forced with shipping one each at a time, which makes logistics operations much more complex. The other part of that is that the time that they have to do that is tightening and tightening with 2-day shipping and next day shipping, and in many cases, 2-hour shipping. And so this growth that's occurred this year in particular is a 5% move from what occurred in 2019. So there's some interesting anecdotal comments that have been made as it relates to COVID. And this is from UBS, an international finance firm. They say 25% of all US retail spending will be online by 2025. So if you look at those the prior graph, that's basically a doubling in the next 5 years, but a trend that's expected to force 100,000 physical stores to close. And there's a forecast for 20,000 stores a year to close this year alone. Shopify network chief Thomas Epping said COVID-19 has pushed e-commerce growth forward by 10 years. And so what this translates into is an industry trend that is occurring. And so a few years back, CB Richard Ellis, a nationwide leader in industrial real estate development and warehouse leasing, came up with a statistic. They had to because their forecasts were greatly off. And so they're translating about for every additional $1 billion in e-commerce sales, there's an additional need for 1.25 million square feet of distribution space. So if you do the math going back for the jump from 2019 to 2020 with 5% growth, which represents about $150 billion to $175 billion a year growth in e-commerce, there's a forecast that there'll be a need to add around 175 million square feet of warehouse space within the next year. And that trend is continuing and will continue in years to come. And what this is doing is accelerating the need for skilled technicians to keep these highly automated facilities operational. So the center has played a role in the development of a certification with the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council. And what we did upon center's formation is do some initial research. And there was a gap identified that I had touched upon earlier related to there was no existing nationally validated industry recognized certification in this space. So an MOU was entered into between an industry association, MSSC, and the center. And the center's role was to do the research. And the center convened groups of our industry leadership team members. I showed the slide earlier who they were. And for focus groups to draw out information about what these technicians specifically do in today's automated logistics world. Consumer good retailers were involved. The large package shipping companies were involved, and manufacturers and installers of automated equipment and systems were involved in that process. Then that industry research was documented, formally documented, then sent on to MSSC for MSSC to do their part in the development of a certification, which is ANSI and ISO accredited. During the process, the industry leadership team from the center helped validate the research and help validate the assessments that were part of the research. They also provided comment into the design of the SkillBoss logistics device that Paul Perkins will be speaking about in a few minutes. There was also industry involvement in the design of the e-learning itself to make sure that it maps over to all the skill sets that were identified in the tasks that need to be performed by these technicians. Going forward, it's the center's role to be able to help raise awareness with our collaborative partners, and hence our participation in today's webinar. So in the background, there are a number of certification pilot programs that are going on in support of the certification. And again, Paul talking about the SkillBoss logistics device in 7 different schools in, I think that's 6 different states, along with 4 that are being hosted by the Target Corporation in 4 different states themselves. There's a lot of other interest and a lot of other collaborative partners coming aboard at this juncture. And we're very excited. The center is extremely excited about the direction that this work based on the center's initial research is taking on. If you're interested in an industry executive who's interested in learning more, please feel free to reach out to me. My email's on the screen.